Hey everybody, it's Doc, and today we're going to be talking more about the ASUS ROG Ally. Now, if you saw my previous video, I really like this device. I mean, it feels good in the hand, the buttons are responsive, the triggers are great, the ABXYs are a little loose, but other than that, I mean, this is a great first offering from ASUS in a handheld device. It is, to many people, the SteamDeck killer, and I love it. It took me a while to get it set up, and I wanted to do a video today just to talk a little bit about the trials and tribulations I had with expanding the memory on this unit. Now, just like with the Steam Deck and this device here, you can open it up and replace parts. Now, that could void your warranty, and please take what I say with a grain of salt because I don't want to be responsible for breaking any devices. But I just want to go through the issues that I had, because although this is flashy and useful on the top level, the inner workings of being able to restore the system, go about the right steps in order to get the system to be reloaded on a new drive is not as straightforward as you might think. And it actually took me the better part of a day just to get this back up and running the way I wanted. So stay tuned to the video. Hopefully you learn from my mistakes and it makes your process a lot more error-free and seamless. And if you have any updates that you feel like really help in improving on what I did, please leave a comment below so that the community could know. And I think that this video just might help a couple people out there. So that's why I did it. Check it out.
So you want to upgrade that memory inside your ASUS ROG Ally. Well, let's talk about that. So why would you want to do it? Well, obviously with games becoming larger every year, 10, 15, 40, 70 gigabytes each, it makes sense to have as much internal storage as possible to get as many games on the go as you can. ASUS allows this, and they actually posted a video online on how to do it, but the process isn't quite as smooth as it may seem. So let's go over what I did when I upgraded my unit, talk about what happened, and let's make sure you don't make the same error. The initial setup of the ROG Ally is pretty straightforward. I mean, you're basically just setting up a Windows PC, and that involves booting into the system, answering the few questions, setting up wireless networking, and then you're basically into the Windows desktop and ready to start customizing your experience with Armory Crate. The general online consensus that I found when I was reading Reddit posts and forum posts about upgrading the internal storage in the ASUS Ally was to make sure that you got into the system and upgraded the BIOS and all the firmware so that the reinstall would occur appropriately. So that's what I did. I went into the Armory Crate software, I went to check for updates, I also went into Windows Update, and it actually found some firmware updates and some BIOS updates in these two pieces of software, and I went along my way and applied all the updates and waited patiently until they took. Interestingly enough, for a new piece of hardware, there were a lot of updates when I opened this thing up. I mean, I was actually surprised how many things had to download, how many restarts were necessary, and I basically thought that I got through them all. But after applying updates and rechecking, there were still more updates to do on Armory Crate. Now, a lot of this was software updates, but I felt that maybe some hardware updates would only appear after certain software fixes were in place. So I updated everything. And after that first BIOS downloaded, I waited patiently while the display showed me the progress of writing the new BIOS to the motherboard. After a restart, and by holding the volume down button while powering on the device, I was brought back into the BIOS to find out that we were on BIOS version 3.17. Thinking that everything was up to date, I felt it was time to power down the unit and let's exchange the SSD. The back of the unit has 6 screws. They look identical, but the middle one on the bottom is actually a shorter screw, so you're going to want to make sure you keep that one separate from the rest. You can open these with a size 0 Phillips head screwdriver. The screws actually didn't come out that easily, especially the bottom middle one. I believe there was a plastic washer on the inside that was keeping the screw from being pulled out of the plastic. But after they're out, time to get the new 1TB NVMe 4.0 SSD drive. You'll have to use a pry tool, a plastic spudger, or maybe just some strong fingernails to separate the plastic. Once it starts to separate, it pops open very easily and exposes the internals. You'll then want to disconnect this wire here, which is the connection between the motherboard and the battery. Don't want to introduce some unnecessary electrical damage to the process. Once you do that, you'll see that the SSD lies under this plastic shielding. One screw will remove this SSD with ease. Installing the new SSD is just as easily. Just reverse the steps and put the screw back in. Seems pretty easy, doesn't it? After securing the SSD in place and plugging the battery back in to ensure power to the device, all that's left for you to do is to apply the back plate and screws again. If the power light illuminates on the top of the device after you plug it back in, once you put it all back together, you are good to go to the next step. Or so you would think. So this is where my troubles start. As I said a little bit earlier, I looked at my BIOS and I found out that I was on 3.17. There was a BIOS update found in Windows Explorer and Armory Crate, as well as a host of different updates to firmware. And being that I thought everything was completely up to date, I went into the recovery portion of the BIOS. Now, this can be found under Advanced section and then ASUS Cloud Recovery. Now, I don't know if this is a problem with the hardware on my device or possibly software or connectivity issues, but multiple times during this process, my device stopped responding to any input at all. So I couldn't move the mouse. Even plugging in a mouse didn't change anything. So I was forced to have to do a hard reset. Second time's a charm, right? This time I was allowed into the actual portion where I can hook up to the Wi-Fi and start downloading the new software onto the blank SSD. Hooked up to the Wi-Fi without much difficulty, and then the system started downloading the files. This takes a while. And after all that download time, the recovery progress stopped around this area here, where it would not write any more data to the M.2. So I couldn't progress any further. And I had no real idea why this wouldn't work. I mean, I thought I got the new BIOS update and all the firmware updates, but yet for some reason, if the system didn't lock up on me in this cloud recovery environment, it wouldn't go any further than this. And I let this sit for hours, and then I rebooted and did the whole process a second time and came to the same spot where it went 0% and never progressed. And after trying multiple times, and as you can see here with this blurry overhead cam, because that was the only footage I had, it still just either locks up in cloud recovery, it downloads the data but doesn't write the data to the hard drive. But no matter what, I just couldn't progress. So what I read on Reddit, put the old M.2 back in. So we went back to the drawing board. And this is probably the most important part of this video, and thanks if you watched 14 minutes into this to figure this out, but it may be obvious to you guys, but I have ASUS motherboards. I have the Z13 Flow tablet, but if you really want to update your ASUS device appropriately, you gotta go to the MyASUS app. You have to register on the MyASUS app, and then it will show you other downloads. Now, I find this odd because Windows showed me specific firmware updates. The Armory Crate showed me specific updates in the beginning, But when I thought I was completely up to date on everything, I in fact was not. And I needed to go to the MyASUS app and actually look. And under the MyASUS app, it actually found another 3 updates along with a secondary firmware update. You know, once you log in and do those updates and do the multiple restarts that you need to do, well, that changes everything. Because once I was able to do that, besides some internet connectivity issues, which still, to me, seems to be a problem in the cloud recovery environment of the BIOS, it still at times can lock up. But everything downloaded appropriately this time, and everything wrote to the hard drive appropriately this time. And this is a little issue, but if you're not used to using the MyASUS app to upgrade your device and think that you can get everything you need from ASUS Armory Crate as well as Windows Update, because, you know, Windows Update keeps on top of hardware and software updates as well. I mean, I've seen my Surface device have firmware updates that show up on, you know, Windows Update. But, you know, this also showed an update as well, which I thought that was all there was to it because there was nothing else showing. But unfortunately, you have to go to MyASUS. You have to update through there, get everything that you need from there, and then the recovery environment will allow you to rewrite the OS and the ASUS software back onto an M.2, and it will save you a ton of headache, like a ton of headache. So I think ASUS needs to improve upon this process because it's not obvious. They should say on the recovery tool software, go to MyASUS first, make sure everything's downloaded before you do a firmware update. And if you've read some of the news, the 3.19 firmware actually seems to be associated with a degradation of performance. But you can't update a hard drive on 3.17 because they're past that. So I guess that what you'll need to do is if you want to increase the hard drive size on your Ally, you're going to have to do a BIOS update to 3.19 under the MyASUS app, make sure everything else has its firmware upgraded as well, and then you're going to have to do a process, which they have online, for you to revert back to 3.17 after that hard drive has already been written to with the new Windows OS. So it is a clunky process. And for now, I'm probably just going to stick with 3.19 because I don't feel like going through the rigmarole after taking an entire day to figure this out. But I hope this video helps other people because this is a pain in the ass.
All right, everybody, so let's just go over everything in a quick summary because most of you will probably just skip to the summary, so I figured let's just lay it out here. Here's what I recommend, and I'm not 100% certain that I don't have a specific problem with my device with hardware or some sort of incompatibility, but for what I can tell, if you want to upgrade the hard drive in your ASUS Ally, you should try to update first all firmware, all BIOSes, and you can't just use Armory Crate, which I've used to update my motherboard on my desktop all the time. So you can't just use that. You have to use the MyASUS app, not just Windows Explorer, not just Armory Crate. Use the MyASUS app to make sure that you have all of the required updates. Then power down the device. Replace your SSD to the new larger volume SSD. Make sure it's a compatible one. Close up your device, reboot your machine, go into cloud recovery. Hopefully you won't have lockups like I did. I still can't explain the lockups and the internet connection drops. I mean, I have a Wi-Fi 6E mesh network and none of my other devices have any problems hooking up to the internet, so not sure if that's a problem with the motherboard or with the BIOS. So, you know, your mileage may vary in that respect, but, you know, update everything first, then do cloud recovery, And then you're going to have the new 3.19 BIOS at the time of this recording. And if they're still having issues with performance, there's a significant percentage performance drop reported with this BIOS. Once you have everything on, then you're going to have to do a reverse, adjustment of your BIOS back to 3.17. But I just can't get the OS to load on 3.17. And if you notice something that I'm doing wrong, or you have a step in here that you feel that I'm causing the problem, because the most common cause of computer error is human error. So if you notice that I'm doing something wrong that you think is causing all this issue and I'm completely off, please put it in the comments below, because this video is just out there to try to help other people. I hope you enjoyed watching the video, guys. Sorry about the bad video quality on that overhead shot. Unfortunately, I was using my unboxing settings and I didn't zoom in, and once it was gone, it was gone. So hopefully you still get information from this video. Please, as I said, like and subscribe. Follow me on social media, Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and our podcast with my friend Damo, and our video game. We're actually building a video game, so check out. We hint a little bit about what we're going to be doing, but we have to keep it a little bit hush-hush right now. And that's The Modern Boomer. You can go on YouTube for that as well, and please subscribe to that. And you can catch all the different podcasts on all the different podcasting platforms that are out there. iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I believe it's SiriusXM too. I mean, you can go on just about anywhere and find that podcast. So, guys, if you have any questions, comments, difficulties, I'll do my best to answer them. Thanks again for watching, guys. Bye-bye.